Cursebreaker, Volume 1, Enchanted, by Melinda Kucsera, Scene 2.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Grigori growled in Sarn's ear, resolving the whole identity question. Since the answer to that was obvious, Sarn didn't bother replying in words. He let his struggle speak for him, though he shouldn't have bothered. He had several inches on Grigori, but the man-mountain had a bear's strength and he knew how to use it. Pressure to Sarn's throat cut off his air supply, and he quit struggling. Grigori could snap him in half if the ranger wanted to, and there was nothing Sarn could do to stop that.
What were you thinking?
Grigori spoke slowly, enunciating each word as if he spoke to a mentally deficient person, which is what he thought Sarn was. He did let up on the pressure, though not before Sarn's knees jellied and his sight dimmed. Grigori let go suddenly, and Sarn struggled to breathe and remain on his feet, or he did until a ham-sized fist pushed him down onto a nearby bench.
Oh, stop that! I didn't squeeze you that hard, and besides, you ain't that breakable.
Grigori punctuated that understatement by attempting to ruffle Sarn's hair. Since his hood was in the way, the man-mountain knocked Sarn's hood back, exposing his face. Grigori sucked in a shocked breath and turned Sarn's face into the setting sun's light. The hand holding Sarn's chin immobile shook.
Who did this to you?
Sarn eased out of Grigori's grip and shook his head as he righted his hood. He couldn't lie, but neither could he speak the truth that perched on the tip of his tongue. It was complicated, so much so that it was better for all if he kept his mouth shut. Besides, it was none of Grigori's business, so he maintained his silence.
Who did this to you?
Grigori repeated his question slowly and with much menace. Sarn shook his head and pushed to his feet, arms automatically crossing under his cloak. Grigori gave him space, but he begrudged Sarn every inch of it. Who was easy? A bunch of idiots, with mass on their side and a reputation to prove. What they thought to gain from ambushing an unarmed man, Sarn had no clue. Due to the early hour, there hadn't even been any witnesses. The tight confines of the tunnel had left little room to maneuver. It would have been worse had those same ruffians not been starving, and had Sarn not been carrying what had felt like a metric ton of food at the time. He'd gotten off easy with a few bruises, and only one to his face, to his unscarred cheek, of course. That blow had knocked him for a loop, though. By the time he'd recovered enough of his senses, the ruffians had been long gone, and so had the food Sarn had stolen. That had necessitated a return trip up 200-plus twisting stairs and more thieving, but that couldn't be helped. People depended on Sarn. So he had schlepped back up to the land of plenty to procure more food. That unexpected detour had cost him more than 2 hours of sleep, thus deepening the deficit he carried around.
You can tell me, or you can tell Jurlo, but before the night's done, you're telling someone. You hear me, boy?
I turned 20 last November. I'm not a child.
Then don't act like one.
Sarn blew out a breath and rolled his eyes. Since they glowed a shocking green, Grigori saw that eye roll, despite the hood and its shadows. A freak he was, and no one would ever mistake him as anything else. Grigori fished a black strip of cloth out of his pocket and handed it to Sarn.
Bind your eyes so you don't cause a panic, and let's go.
Sarn took the cloth and donned it while Grigori watched. The man-mountain grunted and then retied the cloth tighter before grabbing Sarn by his upper arm and dragging him back towards the mountain's core. A bell tolled 19 times. Each peal faded before the next struck. Sarn wondered if being in Grigori's custody counted as on time. He hoped it did. The punishment for lateness was a whipping, and he had enough scars on his back already. He didn't need any more. It rankled to be led around like a blind man, all because people couldn't stand the sight of his eyes. Yet it was a reality, and it was all the magic's fault. He hadn't wanted magic, nor sought it out. Having only a dim recollection of his mother, and no information about his father, he had no idea which one of them had cursed him with it. No idea which one of them to curse for it, either. So he plodded along behind Grigori, who jinked constantly to avoid statuary and people as they moved into more populous areas of the mountain stronghold turned city. Their pace also suffered as the crowds of folk moving about impeded their progress.
Stairs,
Grigori grunted, just before the ground vanished under Sarn's boot. He had known the stairs were near thanks to the map that shared space in his head. It had popped up the instant the blindfolded cut off his view of the world, so he'd been expecting a sudden drop. His boot landed on the first step, and he descended with one hand trailing along the curving wall that enclosed the staircase. The map in his head imploded, and then reformed, this time with 3 dimensions instead of the usual 2. He saw a gray outline of the stair. It had imposed itself on the featureless green light trapped behind the blindfold, allowing him to anticipate each twist. No statues on the stair made the going easier. So did the relative emptiness. This stair was neither well known nor used by anyone other than the guards and the rangers. Since Mount Eredrin had at least 50 staircases that Sarn knew of, folk hardly needed to patronize this one. Not when there existed staircases much closer to the areas inhabited by the better classes. Staircases that were wider and less twisted than this jumped-up ladder-like affair. 100 steps later, Grigori triggered the catch, hidden in a patch of stone by bumping it with his heel. Part of the curved wall enclosing the stair slid aside, making no more noise than a whisper might. Sarn wasn't supposed to know about the catch hidden just there, but the mechanism that operated the secret door had some magic about it, so its catch glowed to Sarn's eyes. He could sense it even blindfolded, but he pretended ignorance, and that kept Grigori happy. Keeping Grigori happy was a priority right now, because the man's testimony was the only thing that might save Sarn from punishment for being late. It was now at least 19:30 bell, half past the time that Sarn should have met his master.
I found him. The damn fool was trying to fly.
Grigori punctuated his statement by shoving Sarn forward, and he nearly tripped over the track in the floor that moved the door. Trying to fly? Nolo asked as he took possession of Sarn's arm. Sarn yanked his arm free. He was tired of being led around like a fool. There was no one else out here on this precipice except the 3 of them, no one to be freaked out by his eyes, and that meant it was time to remove it. I wasn't trying to fly. Sarn reached up to finger the blindfold. He hated the thing, and wanted to rip it off, but a hand caught his arm halfway to its goal and wrested it. Leave it. Sarn shot Nolo a surprised glare that was spoiled by the blindfold. Usually he could count on the man to take his side. What had changed?
You were trying to advise something,
Grigori continued, ignoring the byplay. We'll talk about it later. Right now I need you both to come with me. Nolo must have ended that with a gesture towards wherever he wanted them to go, but Sarn couldn't see it. He could only guess their direction to be northeast, where his mental map indicated other rangers had assembled.